What's up, strongest men, women, and children from blocks all around the world? I am my block's strongest man, and tonight I have a very, very special guest for you. Fresh off the official Strongman Games 2021, second place podium finishing and qualifying for Giants Live, Spenser Remick. What's up, Spencer?
Just glad to be here. Excited to have a conversation with everybody tonight and talk strongman and talk about what it takes to get to OSG and Giants Live and hopefully beyond, and just have a great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we like to have targeted discussions like that, and I think kind of the path to becoming a world-level strongman is something that a lot of people in the audience would be really interested to hear. So, why don't we start off with how did you and strongman first cross paths? Like, how did you get your start?
That's a great question. So I think, like a lot of people, I kind of fell in love with World's Strongest Man when it was on ESPN in the late 90s. So kind of aging myself there a little bit, but it was something that was always super interesting to me. And as somebody who played competitive sports, lifting was always a part of that, and I could see myself getting into it. So a couple years after college, when my football career was over, found a local strongman contest and signed up for it and started training. And fortunately, I say fortunately, I got third place in my first contest. I think if I would have won, I probably would have told myself I was too good for this and didn't really need to continue to work hard. But luckily, I got third actually in my first two contests. And then I kind of got on a roll and had quite a bit of success. So just kind of an outlet for competition, staying active, staying in the lifting environment was really kind of a perfect storm for me to get into strongman. And obviously having what I felt like was hard-earned success at the time made it even more gratifying. So, just a good example of a lot of things coming to fruition and taking advantage of an opportunity when it popped up, and kind of the rest is history and still working through what the future looks like too.
So what position did you play when you played football?
So I played offensive line. So like a lot of guys that I've run into in the strongman world, a lot of former linemen out there. I think some of it is because you have to be obviously you need to be tough, but maybe a little bit egotistical and maybe a little bit stupid too. So you have to put yourself in situations that not a lot of people would want to be. So I think having that lineman mentality bodes well for strongman as well.
Yeah, I've come across something like that as well, because I've talked to quite a few other strongmen who, if they played football before, were always linemen. So I almost could predict that's what you were going to say.
Right. Yeah. Not including the body type either. Obviously that bodes well to it as well.
For sure, for sure. And we'll just take a momentary break to welcome our co-host, Isaac, from Hunger Smash Fitness. What's up, Isaac? How are you this evening?
Good. Sorry I'm a little bit late, but better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, and so we're going to be eventually talking about OSG. And Spencer, you've been to, I think, 3 different OSGs, if I'm right.
Yep.
So we'll get to that in a moment. And, it's always awesome to see such great strongman contests in the U.S., like U.S.-based contests. And I think that's actually a good segue to talk about our sponsors for tonight's live stream, and that's Garage Gym Life Media. So for those people who like all of the in-depth analysis that I do on my channel for Strongman and are wondering who's streaming all these contests like Central Georgia's Strongest Man or the Mammoth Strain Challenge Pro-Am, that's the fine folks over at Garage Gym Life Media. And so I want to let John Greaves III over at Garage Gym Life Media tell you a little bit more about what they're doing there.
Training in a home gym, especially if you're training by yourself, can be tough because sometimes you just don't have the motivation to go in your garage or your basement and get it done. And that's why we stream competitions every month on the Garage Gym Life Media YouTube channel. I'm John Greaves III, founder of Garage Gym Life Media, and after 20 years of training in a home gym, I can tell you that there's some days when I just don't feel like training. And those are the days when I put on some sort of training video or other strength-related content to give me the extra motivation I need to get in there and get it done. There is nothing more motivating than seeing people achieving their goals at a powerlifting meet or a strongman competition. And that's why month after month, we provide that content to you right there in the comfort of your own home on our YouTube channel. Plus, we leave it up forever so you can always just throw it on in the background anytime you need that extra dose of motivation to get you going. And that's why, if you're not already a subscriber to Garage Gym Life Media, I invite you to take advantage of this opportunity to add this powerful training tool into your arsenal, because I want you to succeed right there in the best gym in town.
And so we thank our friends over at Garage Gym Life Media once again for sponsoring this live stream. And the link to their channel and how to subscribe over there will be in the description below. So back, Spencer, to talking about kind of how you got involved with Strongman and your first contest there. What was the first event that really got your attention? Was it stones? Was it overhead pressing? What really got your attention the most?
I would say probably the farmers walks. Kind of one of those things was kind of a match made in heaven. I actually did grow up on a farm, so it was almost a stereotypical thing for me to be good at. Kind of found that I didn't need to train them very much to be good at them. So that was another added benefit, that I didn't have to kill myself in training to have some success. So I would say just, kind of that mentality of, I'm going to pick up these two heavy things and I'm going to go as fast as I can and try to beat everybody at it, was really kind of what got me hooked at first. And then I would say probably the yoke, and then overhead from there kind of really became my top few events, to the point where, as an amateur, the first few years, I pretty much knew that if I was going to win the overhead event, I was probably going to win the whole contest, because that was really where I was the most consistent. So once I got to the pro level, that changed a little bit. Once you're overhead pressing against guys who are pushing the 500-pound mark, and that's not really an option. So you've got to figure out a way to get a little bit better and steal some points, knowing that you might not necessarily have a big lead after the first event. So yeah, definitely the carrying events, and then overhead from there. And then, the stones and the carries are still opportunities for me as well.
So for somebody doing farmers for the first time, what would you say would be your best tips on how to get started? And I'll tell you a funny story about why when you're done explaining.
I would say the biggest thing that I see people make mistakes with is where they grab the handles. So I always tell people, grab the handle about a half an inch to the rear of the handle, because that's going to tip the weight forward and it's going to pull your momentum forward. But then also your focal point for your eyes is huge too. So any event I do, if it involves a carry, whether it's farmers or yoke, I always pick something that I focus on as I'm walking to keep my head stationary and keep it from going down or up, to keep my momentum going forward. So those are really my top two.
You're muted, John.
Sorry. Yeah, so it's interesting. I'll keep that in mind, and this is why I asked. So I was talking to Isaac, because Isaac has competed amateur before. So I said, hey, I want to get my first piece of Strongman equipment for Christmas. I want my wife to give me something. So what should I get? And I was thinking log at first, and it got really hard to find a wood log. Like Slater's way back ordered. And so I thought, how about farmers? And farmers were easier to find. So gave my wife the link. And then I thought, hey, if you were to buy me this for Christmas, when it arrives, it can't be a surprise, because I'm going to have to carry it up the front stairs. I don't think you can do it. And this happened.
I suppose that would be tip number 3. Make sure you have a plan in mind for where they're going to go when you get them.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. Isaac, what was your first event? I don't know if I ever asked you.
First event in a competition was a truck pull. They had a box truck loaded up with tires, and it was a harness and a rope and everything. And it was actually extremely disappointing, because I was the first one to go, and there were 5 other guys in my class or whatever, in my group. And we all finished within 1 second of each other. So it was like 0.2 seconds between everybody. And so I finished, I think, in 4th with that event. And then the other events, I ended up doing 1st or 2nd on almost everything. And so I think I got 2nd place by 1 point or something like that in the 5th event. But
so if somebody has a fat finger on the truck pull, you could go from first to last.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was frustrating, because it's a 13,000 pound truck or whatever, and then they load it up with tires, so I have no clue how much the final weight was. And it was slightly uphill in a parking lot, and so it was really hard to get started, and then you'd finally get some momentum, and then you kind of hit another hill and it'd just stall out on you a little bit. So and I'd never done I'd pushed trucks uphill before, but I'd never actually pulled one, so it was very, very interesting. I did want to.
Nobody else has done it either.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to ask you about the farmers too, because for the most part, most farmers handles that I've seen are usually smooth. Mm-hmm. but I helped out with a comp a little bit ago, and the handles that they had were extremely knurled, like, and it was one of those things where we had a lot of guys, so you could pick it the first time and run with it for the first little bit, but if you dropped it at all, it was chewing up their hands so much. And I was just thinking, I've never run into that before. I've never seen knurled handles. So is that something you've come across before?
I've never really used anything that had a super aggressive knurl. I have seen some that have kind of almost like a dimpling pattern, but not necessarily super aggressive knurling. But I think even with an aggressive knurl, the deeper you can get it into your palm when you start, and you probably experienced that too, the less potential slippage, because knurling is great as long as it doesn't slip out of your hand, like you said. But if it stays where it's supposed to, it can be your best friend. But one thing that I actually learned, probably 5 or 6 years ago, that was one of those things, like, you ever see those memes where it's like, I was today years old when I learned this? One guy was warming up to do farmers with straps, and we're like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, I'm saving my grip for when I need to use it. It's like, I'm using straps for warm-ups to get my body and my nervous system ready, and then my grip will be fresh when I go out to actually do the farmer's walk. So thought that was kind of a paradigm shift for what a lot of guys do, but I think in a setting like that, it might be warranted. That way you're not tearing your hands up in warm-ups too.
Yeah, we've had JF on before, and he's very binary in something. So he said, like, armor should never be knurled. You either have grip or you do not have grip.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to work our way through kind of your journey to becoming a pro, to getting to your Giants Live qualification. But I need to ask, like, if I'm not incorrect, a little French Canadian birdie from Strongman Archive told me that you've done the Giants Live North American Open before in 2018. So aren't you already qualified, or how does that work?
So the qualification system for OSG and then Giants Live, basically each year or season is separate. So I qualified for Giants Live North America 2018 via OSG 2017. So then from there, without qualifying for Worlds outright in 2018 at Giants Live, basically the qualification system started over. So getting in the top 10 at OSG will automatically qualify you for the following year. But with an injury, I missed OSG in 2018 after the Giants Live contest. So Lynn Morehouse was gracious enough to invite me back in 2019 without having to requalify, just because of the fact that I finished in the top 3 and had an injury that kept me out of it. So I was able to go back in 2019 and then ended up finishing in the top 10. I believe I was 8th or 9th. So one of the things that Lynn does, which is great, but doesn't always benefit everyone, is when you go from day 2 to day 3, and I'm sure you guys saw this year, they recalculate the points as if it had only been the top 10 competing the whole time. So I'm one of those guys, with the experience that I've had, I've become very well-rounded in a lot of the events. So through day 1 and day 2, I was finishing 5th, 6th, 7th in pretty much every event, which in a field of 30 athletes is going to get you to a point where you're going to be in the top 3 or top 4. But then when those points get redivided, I went from being in 4th place at the end of day 2 to 7th place when day 3 started. So I was 5 or 6 points back from being in the top 3. So really not any way to recover from that. So finished lower than I would have liked to, obviously coming off injury. My training was good, but I think I was missing some of the competitive edge that I needed after not competing for a year. So there was some challenges and things I needed to work through in my own head there too. And then finishing in the top 10 in 2019, obviously with some of the events that took place in 2020, OSG was canceled and pushed to 2021. So still had the automatic qualification and came in healthy, ready, and everything really worked out exactly the way I could have hoped for. So stayed consistently in the top 2 or 3. Didn't win any events, but that's not really my thing. If I can stay in the top 3 or 4 at least, I usually end up in a pretty good spot, and that's pretty much exactly what happened this year at OSG. So definitely couldn't be happier with how things turned out. At the end of it, a lot of people asked me if I was disappointed that I didn't win. And I said, winning only crossed my mind for like 5 minutes after the sandbag throw, because I was never even on my radar. I'm like, my goal was top 3 from the get-go, and winning would have been awesome. But, podium is podium in my mind. So, just having that opportunity to be guaranteed that next step was really what I was looking for.
Yeah, and for folks that aren't following that points calculation that Spenser was referring to, if you take a look here on official Strongman Games Instagram, for example, he's right here at 53 points. This is after day 1. So you would think, how is he at 53 points in day 1? And then after it's all said and done in 3 days, he's at 47 points. And again, that's because, as Spenser described, they take the top 10 that go to the finals and then calculate their points. Like if Spenser had 26 points, which I think you had on the log press, that 26, I think you were second place. That would be 9 points now instead of 26 or whatever, because it's out of the top 10 guys. So a little bit difficult to follow, but that's how they do it.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where sometimes it'll benefit you. So in 2017,
Right.
it bumped me from 3rd place to 1st place when day 3 started, and in 2019, 4th to 7th. So I don't have a leg to stand on as far as being upset about it, because it's about as equitable as it gets, and it's a very well thought out system, and just kind of the nature of a 3-day contest. You have to have some sort of system to narrow things down, and that's what it is. So.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about the plan, though, because you said, you never really, it didn't cross your mind very much that you had to win this show. Like, did you have a plan kind of career-wise? Like, I'm going to get to a pro level, I'm going to qualify for a specific OSG because that's the path to Giants Live, and I need to make the podium. Kind of like, what was the whole thought process over multiple years to get to the point where you are now and with your qualifier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started Strongman in 2011, and kind of at that time, there was really only one governing body for the amateur ranks, and kind of the ultimate goal there was to get to nationals. So, everybody wants to qualify for nationals and then go to nationals. So I qualified in my first year competing. Chose not to go because I didn't want to go just to say that I did. So I went to nationals in 2012 and ended up 8th, which I was blown away by. I've never really tried to get too confident going into anything, just because there's so many unknowns, and I just try to play my own game and let the chips fall where they may, because you never know who's going to show up that you've never even heard of that's going to smoke everybody. I think we've all seen that happen. So you just have to stay within your own boundaries. But I think the possibility of getting a pro card really became a reality in 2012 when I went to nationals and got 8th, and then finished, I believe, 12th at the Arnold the following year. So didn't make the main stage, but that was still more fuel there, and really seeing guys who I competed with very well, and in certain cases beat in contest, getting their pro cards really fueled me to take that next step. So, going from the amateur level to pro level in 4 years, I was pretty excited about that. That really went a lot quicker than I thought it would. But in reality, it was probably 2 years before I was ready. And kind of talking with other guys who had gotten their pro cards, they even said, don't plan on being competitive at the pro level for 2 years, just because, I don't want to say it's easy, because it's certainly not. But if you're at a certain level, getting a pro card is pretty attainable for guys who stick with it. But then truly being able to compete at the pro level is a whole different story. So my first year or two competing at the pro level, I think I finished 8th or 9th in every contest I did, and then kind of gradually worked up to getting 5th or 6th, and then 3rd or 4th. It's a year by year process, and it might take you a year to get any sort of tangible improvement at one event too. So for me, it was overhead pressing and deadlifting, which were 2 things that I excelled at the amateur level. So I really needed to kind of treat it like 2 separate careers. I had an amateur career and then a professional career. And, the professional career has been longer, but also more challenging. And that's kind of where some injuries have taken place. I stayed pretty healthy throughout the amateur portion. But just with, heightened amounts of competition and the increased demand from training and the things that you need to do from a timing perspective and nutrition perspective are just a whole different level. And, taking all those things into account, it's not easy. And, you do see the guys who kind of come onto Strongman and a year later they're at World's Strongest Man or at the Arnold maiden stage. And I think myself included, you see those guys and you kind of reflect on yourself, but you also have to think that most of the guys that you see at World's Strongest Man and at the Arnold, it takes 8, 10, 12 years to get there. And you kind of need to give yourself a little bit of a break too. So kind of a good reality check.
Yeah, even guys who are at World's Strongest Man for the first or second time, like they're to the same point, not necessarily competitive right away. With some of the veterans. But so you talked about back in the day, there was really one organization. Was that Strongman Corp you were talking about?
It was. Yep.
Yeah. So coincidentally, one of our buddies, Costin Sutton's in the comments, and he's a state rep for South Carolina. So he has some nice things to say about you. I'll pop up on the screen. So he says, I wouldn't have found out who Spenser was without OSG this year, hoping he kicks some ass at Giants Live and makes it to World's Strongest Man. We need some newer American athletes at World's Strongest Man. So we always, the two of us and Costin, we root hard for Wes Claiborne and Marcus Crowder and you as well. And really would like to see those faces at the at World's Strongest Man.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I definitely would too. It's just a good example of the friendships that you can make through this too. Guys who live 1,000+ miles away that you might only see once a year, but you end up kind of having that bond through, not necessarily shared misery by any stretch of the word, but you can see some people at their best and at their worst in a strongman contest, and you can really create a pretty good bond, even if there are no other common interests. So it's definitely good to be able to root for other people, even if you are competing with them, because you genuinely want to see them successful too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, strongman, as compared to basically any other sport, not only strength sports, is just so much more welcoming. I've noticed. It's amazing how helpful people are. Like I reached out to you, and you were like, "Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll hop on." Like I don't see that happening in any other sport, so it's really a wonderful community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once you get, I think other sports people can be a little bit standoffish, even if it's a strength or physique type sport. But strongman's really not that way. And obviously in the middle of a contest, I'm probably not going to be asking you like what your kids' names are or anything like that. But before and after, definitely. But after that first event starts, and if it's kind of a quick succession, I want to bury you as opposed to find out about your life and your passions, and then afterwards we'll be friends again. So
yeah, I mean, speaking of physique competition, if you don't mind me asking, your wife competes in the IFBB. Do you ever have like a healthy push each other in the gym kind of relationship?
Yeah, we totally do, and it's actually it's outside of the gym as well. Obviously, strongman and physique sports, bikini specifically, can be very taxing, mentally. And we've got a good relationship where if she's worn down or overtrained, we've kind of given each other full permission to say, hey, you need to take a step back a little bit and focus on what's important, because very few people get rich doing either of those things. And we have a 3-year-old daughter, and we try to be very intentional about time spent together and time spent with her. And sometimes it's the opposite, where she might feel guilty about training on an evening and might not see her at all during the day, and I might do the same thing. And I think it's another example of you need to have that reminder that this is a priority. She's gonna have more respect for you for doing something very cool and very unique than for you watching TV with her one extra night or reading a book. We want her to look back and see pictures and videos of us from when she was 3, 4, 5 years old and say, my mom and dad were doing some pretty cool stuff. So we kind of have to give each other that gut check too, that, we have opportunities to do things a lot of people don't, and we owe it to ourselves and owe it to her as our child to take advantage of those. But yeah, it's definitely a different world going to a bodybuilding show versus a strongman show. I mean, everybody's got the same goal in mind, but a very different set of nervous undertones for sure. Just
Yeah, I mean, I followed a little bit of bodybuilding. I actually watched a lot of Greg Doucette when I was first starting out my my channel, and it's a different outcome, right? Like
right,
in strongman, you're trying to be as strong as you can. Bodybuilders aren't necessarily strong; they're pretty depleted on stage, right?
right.
They're looking as good as they can.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And I've never felt smaller than I did the first bodybuilding show I went to, and I'm walking around there at 6'3" and like 325 pounds, and I'm like, I feel like I just don't even exist here when you see some of those guys walking around. But probably a little bit of body dysmorphia thrown in the mix too for somebody that looks like me versus what those guys look like too. So
Is that your typical competing size? Because Costin actually asked that as well.
yeah, give or take. I try to not deviate too much between 315, 320, give or take. I started off in the 265 weight class as an amateur, and then kind of slowly just progressed as I got stronger and just gained weight naturally throughout that process. You know, I've kind of found a pretty comfortable spot, you know, in the low 300s and try to stay around there. So I do find that my leverage has changed quite a bit if I get too heavy or not heavy enough. So, you know, for where I'm at, my body feels good. You know, I don't feel disgustingly fat, although some days I probably do. But in general, yeah, that's where I like to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isaac, we've heard similar things from Travis, right? Travis Ortmeyer. He's in the 330 range around there and doesn't like to get too much higher than that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the strongmen, I mean, obviously there's the outliers who just want to get as big as humanly possible. But I think for the most part, guys are trying to stay fairly evenly proportioned. You know, they're not trying to blow up too much or get too small either. That was the other thing is like when we had Dr. Mock on and some of those guys hearing about how they have to do, you know, weight cuts or whatever to get down to a weight class. And I think that would be almost worse than trying to do a weight gain to get up to a weight class. Cause like when you cut, you lose your energy, you lose everything. I don't know. I couldn't perform that way.
Yeah. I've got a huge amount of respect for the weight class athletes. I mean, especially the 105 class, those guys walk around at, you know, 250 or 260 and they'll cut what 15% of their body weight. And obviously they gain it right back, but the toll that takes on your body and mentally, and then competing 24 hours later, you know, I can't overstate the amount of respect I've got for what those guys put themselves through. So it's rolling into a contest fat and happy is much more appealing to me.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are doing incredible things too. I saw a video Big Laws and Liz did recently about the top 10 strongman of 2021. And I commented in there, I said, I know you're focused on open class, but no list about top strongmen in 2021 can be written without Nick Hamby on it.
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, a guy who I don't know if he's done an open contest at this level, but he definitely deserves an opportunity just to be out there. I mean, not many open class guys are going to go out and overhead press 400 pounds on any implement that they see. I mean, he's got a deadlift in the low to mid 800s. So, you know, guys like that, they've definitely earned the opportunity to at least prove that they belong with the big guys too, if they want to. Now, Nick, I don't know if that's his ambition or not, but he certainly could make a statement if he wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. He's done incredible things this year. So eventually, I think we'll get into like what's next in the Giants live path. But leading up to that, I did want to ask you. You've done a few ASM shows too, so kind of like compare and contrast your experiences at OSG shows versus America's Strongest Man shows.
That's a great question. You know, ASMs, both contests I've done, I competed in 2015 and then 2020 this past year. You know, I think they've both been 2-day shows, a little bit faster pace just because it's, you know, maybe 30 athletes total in a couple different weight classes. So you can pack more into a 2-day show versus a 3-day show with smaller athlete classes. I would almost say that some of the ASMs have had a little bit more obscure events. Not that that's a bad thing. I just think some, the two that I've done and the other ones that I've looked at almost seem a little bit more specific. Whereas OSGs, not that it's a good thing or a bad thing, like I said, the events are a little bit more traditional, but then execution at those events becomes way more critical. So I think if the events are a little bit more obscure, so to speak, and maybe it's an implement that nobody's touched, I want to say, the Stone of Steel, the Mike Bartos Stone of Steel was unveiled at one of the ASMs and nobody had one, or the Mike Bartos dumbbell. So I think ASM in the past, we've seen some situations like that where some of the events were wild cards, and there might be some guys there who are super strong that have never touched those implements, and they're going to maybe be a little bit disadvantaged because of it. Where at OSG, the equipment is, I wouldn't say more generalized, but they're potentially more traditional events, maybe with a twist. And then that's where you see the margin for error being so low at an OSG type contest, because you've got so many athletes and, 1 rep or 1 second, because people are so primed for the events and they've maybe trained them, not necessarily leading up to the contest, but throughout their entire strongman career. I think there creates a little bit more of parity there than you might see at an ASM. But like I said, I've only done 2 ASMs in the last 6 years. A lot of it was timing related with work or family or whatever that may be. Wish I could have done more, and I'll certainly do more in the future. But like I said, in my experience with both shows, I think, the differences in events do make a difference there. And, it might be a situation where, Brian Shaw shows up at ASM one year because, he's Brian Shaw and he thinks that he should have the America's Strongest Man title, which he definitely should. So then what do the rest of the guys do? I mean, that's one of those other wild cards where, you can't really predict how those things are going to shake out.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm assuming you didn't do it this year because you were focusing on OSG. They were too close together.
No, actually, I wanted to do ASM. It was originally scheduled for September 11th, I believe, and I was planning on doing it at that weekend, but it got rescheduled to September 25th, which was right in the middle of a 2-week work trade show that I was at. So I wasn't able to disappear over the weekend and swing down to Texas and do it. I did go through some scenarios in my head of how I could figure out a way to do that and have nobody notice, but didn't think it was probably worth the risk. So it probably helped me focus on OSG a little bit more by default. So that was okay. I would have liked to have gone for sure.
You happen to watch any of it all? What do you think of Josh Silvas?
I did. I think he's another one of those guys who he's risen quickly. I've never met him. Seems like everybody has great things to say about him on a personal level. But I think everybody at the open level should probably be very concerned about, especially static events, what he's capable of doing. But I think he won the bag toss too, if I remember right. And anybody that beats Tyler Cotton or Marcus Crowder at a bag toss probably deserves a little bit more credit than just being a log presser and a deadlifter. So no, I look forward to an opportunity to compete with him as well, because he's definitely gained the reputation as one of the rising stars, if not the rising star in the U.S. too.
Yeah, we've had him on the show as well. We had a wonderful time with him, and static monster for sure. That bag loading event, I mean, he was handling a 400-pound bag like it wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where strong is strong, and conditioning and being able to move is one thing, and that a guy that weighs 400 plus pounds, that's always going to be what people are going to be skeptical about. But you also got to think, if he's carrying a 400-pound sandbag, that's like a normal guy carrying a 300-pound sandbag. So keep things relative, and don't discount guys because they're statically strong at all.
Well, I mean, does that mean I'm just as strong because I weigh 182 and I loaded 187-pound stone? So
yeah, totally. Yep. That's how I would see it. Before the coefficient crowd crucifies me, but yeah.
Nice. All right. So then we've talked about ASM, we've talked about OSG, we've talked about your road to OSG and kind of how you got in there this year. You were second place in 3 events, I think. So did really well there, right? Looking at my notes here. Second place in log press. Car walk was 3rd. Deadlift was
Fourth.
Car walk was 2nd. I was looking at Pavlo. Sorry. Car walk was 2nd. Deadlift was 2nd. Carry and drag was 4. Sandbag was 3rd. And then Atlas Stones was 5th. So I was going to ask you if you felt like any of those are weak events for you, but the numbers say none of them are.
Yeah, my only concern really was stones, which obviously is reflected in the way I ended up. Just knowing how good some of those guys are at stone loading, I wanted to make sure going into stones that, you know, I hate the thought process of like trying not to lose, because that's not a mindset that I want to have. You know, I want to win every event. But it was hard to think about, like, you know, if Wes Claiborne beats everybody by 10 seconds, which he could have, or Tyler Cotton beats everybody by 10 seconds. And, you know, what if I tear a bicep on the 3rd stone? You know, not that those are things that creep into your head at the beginning, but, you know, 3 months ago, those are things that you got to think through. So I think stones were really where I was the least confident, but I was happy to have had a buffer, so to speak, to make sure that even if something did go terribly wrong on stones, I could still stay on the podium. So, you know, that's the other challenge with the point situation on day 3, is that essentially everything is worth twice as many points too. So, you know, a really good event is going to help. A really bad event is really going to hurt you. So I wanted to make sure that stones would not do that. And I kind of had a mini heart attack when I bobbled the first 300-pound stone. So I'm like, what just happened? That shouldn't have happened. So I was okay with loading the 5 out of 6 and seeing where the chips fell, and, you know, ending up in 5th place was okay with me. You know, a lot of people, like I said, were concerned that I was frustrated or disappointed with how things ended up. And I still tell people I tied for 1st. So, you know, based on the points I did, but count back is a count back, and those are the rules that you accept too. So, you know, I've put a lot of work into my stone loading because, frankly, at the amateur level, there was a lot of situations where stones weren't super important because I was pretty well rounded in a lot of the events and didn't have a ton of access to outlet stones. You know, I've been super lucky to have accumulated a lot of equipment. So I have stones at my house now, and I'm able to train them a lot more consistently than I was the first part of my career. So being able to do what I feel being poor, you know, having a poor performance in stones, but still loading 5 out of 6 with the last one being a 400-pound stone is definitely something that I feel good about too.
I wanted to ask you too, what's your opinion of the double points on certain events too? Because I've heard a lot of people say that they really dislike when stones in particular are double points compared to everything else. Well, I guess I'll say what I think after I give you a chance first.
Right. You know, I think, you know, I've given that some thought too. And I think the best guy is going to win. You know, there are very few guys who are good stone loaders only. You know, you think about a guy like Wes or a guy like Tyler Cotton, who, you know, they load stones in the mid 500-pound range. They're not stone loader only guys. So, you know, if you get into an opportunity to win an event that's double points and that puts you basically over the top, good for you, because you've earned your way to get there. You know, if you're not performing in the rest of the contest and you win stones, it might put you in the middle of the pack. But, you know, if it's going to turn the tide of a contest, then you've done the right things to get to that point and certainly deserve to be able to do that.
Yes, that's pretty much about what I was going to say too. I was going to say it's an interesting equalizer, and I know some people, because of that, will end up putting too much focus on this singular event, or some, whatever, however they have it placed. But I think usually at the end of the day, the guy who's going to win is going to win, and usually the stones, from what I've seen, typically is not that big of a deciding factor if it's double points versus single points.
No, I would agree. And I think if anything, it makes the stone event more important, because if you think about the way the world's strongest man used to be, look at the heats at the end where a lot of times the guys who were in first or even second, they would just take stones off and save themselves for the final. So I think by making stones competitive, it makes the whole contest more exciting. And, the big initiative with Strongman, especially in the United States, is how do you get more fan involvement, more spectator involvement, and, make the end of the contest extremely climactic. And that's what you're going to end up with. So yeah, I'm all for it, even if it doesn't always help me, because that's what you sign up for.
Yeah, I mean, you did well enough on stones. Pablo had a recent practice at Middle East Strongest Man, so
Right.
that's why he did well.
He also got second in one event and won another one on the third day. So anybody that does that in that field, yeah, they deserve to be where they are.
Yeah, I mean, for the American crowd, I think like he's starting to get a little better known now. How was it competing with him? Like, what was your experience there?
It was kind of one of those things where I got a lot of comments from my friends or people outside of the sport that they're like, watching the live stream, nobody really talked about me because I was consistently third, fourth, second, whatever I was. And competing with Pablo was kind of the same experience. Like, I really didn't notice him because he was kind of hanging with me the whole time. So I wasn't necessarily chasing any of his performances, but every time I looked at the score sheet, it's like, oh, holy crap. Yeah, I need to keep an eye on him too. So, obviously there's a little bit of a language barrier there, but I interacted with him a couple times, and, super humble, genuine, good guy. I mean, it's hard to formulate an opinion over somebody when you don't speak the same language, but just watching him interact with other people and just the way he accepted the way things ended up was good to see.
Yeah, we've had some DMs back and forth. He and I. It seems like a really nice guy, and we're going to try to get him on the channel at some point when he's back at a closer time zone, and we can work it out. But it's I think it'll be fun. But yeah, he's formidable. And for those listening, we're talking about Pavlo Kordiaka, not Pavlo Nakonechny, just so we're clear. Yeah. But cool. So now next step, Giants Live qualified again, right? So have you been in discussions at all? Like, is it going to be one of the first contests in the February timeframe? Do you know any of those details yet?
I don't. I'm still kind of waiting for the dust to settle a little bit before I reach out. I want to say a couple years ago they let us know probably a month after Giants Live what the next steps were going to be. So I'm not in a huge hurry. Just kind of gotten back into training this week, as a matter of fact. So not a huge rush, but it would be good to have a time frame. So if I don't hear anything, I'll probably reach out, but I'm not losing sleep over it just yet. So I'll make sure to update everybody on social media, whatever I find out. But just trying to, create another base and be well-rounded as any sort of prep for another contest starts. So sorry, not a super exciting answer for you guys, but that's what I know anyway.
Nah, it's all good. It's all good. So here's kind of and Isaac, you can jump in after this with anything you have, but here's the last kind of insightful question that I have for you. So are you more excited to see how you will compete in Giants Live against your graduating class, like against Tyler Cotton and Pablo Kordiaka, or against like maybe these unfamiliar guys who you have not competed with against? Which one excites you more?
I think it's probably a combination of both. It'll be good to compete against Tyler and Pablo again and try to take advantage of some of the opportunities that I might have missed to do better. But I think there are a lot of guys who are making a lot of waves in the sport over the last couple of years, and it'll be good to kind of expose where I land with those guys too. So, in 2018 Giants Live, if you guys remember, it was Lawrence Chalet, Mark Felix, some of the guys who'd been around for quite a while, and it was good to really mix it up with those guys and finish, in the top half and really only a couple points off the podium. But then having an opportunity to compete against kind of the new age guys will be huge too. So I would say it's a mix, but obviously I want to beat Pablo the next time around because I feel like I should have the first time. But any opportunity to compete with Tyler is awesome too. So he's definitely a guy who I would say his strengths are the opposite of mine. He's super explosive and he can blow anybody out of the water in any event. Whereas, that's never really been my game. So, I've never even told anybody this, but a lot of times, I train by myself almost exclusively. And the best way I can motivate myself is, imagine looking to my left or looking to my right and seeing somebody like Tyler, next to me getting ready to do yoke run or log press, kind of putting myself in that mental state that, it's contest time and I'm picking the guy who is probably favored to win the event to compete against in my head. So, doing little things like that and seeing them come to fruition in contests is pretty gratifying too.
Interesting insights. Tyler's a monster and also a very nice guy. He's here in New Jersey, so he actually accepted my request to train with him one day. So that's going to be pretty awesome. I hope he's got a stone light enough for me, so we'll see.
We can find something.
So Isaac, anything else you have for Spenser before we wrap up for the evening?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, what, in your opinion, what is the singular favorite event that you've ever had, either because of what the event was or because of the outcome? You smoked everybody by 10 seconds or something like that, or is there one singular event in your mind that was just better than any of the others in your competitions?
I would say there's two. So, Giants Live 2018, the yoke run, I finished third in that event to Lawrence Chalet and Rob Carney, who are probably two of the fastest yoke walkers in the world. But kind of, watching the broadcast after the fact and hearing Colin Bryce make a comment about how fast it was, things like that are huge. But then I'd say probably the most recent one was the bag toss at OSG in 2021. Going into that event in first place and thinking a year ago at ASM was an event that pretty much cost me the podium, if not even the top 5. So didn't finish the way I wanted to just because bag toss was not a strength of mine. And Mike Westerling is my coach. And after that contest, I did bag toss every week for the last 52 weeks. And I calculated probably close to 2,000 individual throws, over a year. So probably seeing that 60-pound bag go over the bar and I didn't even know what Marcus was doing. I had no idea. I was just being methodical, getting my footwork down, having that muscle memory. Seeing that last bag go over was probably one of the more gratifying moments of my career, knowing that was an event that I needed points and I needed to, not necessarily win, but going against Marcus, who absolutely smoked that event in America's Strongest Man in 2020, whereas I finished close to the bottom was pretty sweet. So, and then seeing that Sports Center shared it on a reel was pretty cool too. So I'll take it. But I would say that's still a pretty good highlight for me.
Absolutely. Marcus has the best hair in Strongman, by the way.
Agreed. Yeah. And one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, for sure.
Yeah, he's been on the show. He was one of my first ever interviews. Marcus is a great, great guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the way we usually like to wrap it up, Spenser, is give you a chance to talk about any sponsors you have, anything. I usually say exciting in the future, but we've talked about Giants Live already. But anything else you want to talk about coming up that you'd like the audience to know about, feel free to promote anything. The time is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a couple of really great sponsors. Cerberus Strength has been second to none as far as equipment, basically anything strongman related. So, Ken and his team are awesome to work with, and they it's truly top of the line equipment and a great group of people to work with. Also sponsored by a company called HMB, so local to where I am in Iowa. So one of the first companies that I reached out to once I started on the strongman journey from a supplement perspective. So very grateful for their support. One of my first sponsors that I jokingly say is Remicks Farms. So my parents, when I first started competing, so it was a huge benefit for me to have them help out along the way too. But then, the support from my wife and my friends and, everybody around me has been huge in my career too. So extremely grateful to family, friends, sponsors, everybody that's been a part of this, because, at the end of the day, it's a selfish sport, whether it's a hobby or not, whether you're a professional or not. It takes a ton of time, a ton of sacrifices. And, I've got a great core group of people around me that have definitely made it worth it. So, a lot of things to be thankful for.
Awesome. And how can people follow you if they'd like to do that?
Yep. So I'm on Instagram. So very creative name, Spenser Remick. So SpenserRemick. Facebook as well. So yeah, give me a follow if you have any questions on training or anything strongman related. I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. So, Spenser, thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedule to come join us this evening. We've had an incredible discussion, and you're welcome back anytime, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I definitely appreciate it. So,
Nice chatting with you.
All righty. Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.